The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
When we do have secret prisons, that is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
The president wants to spy on 200. Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Lots of things in the news. Of course, we've got President Obama's State of the Union speech tomorrow. We'll get to that if we have time. But some new issues, some we haven't discussed before. Women in the military, should they be allowed to serve in combat roles? That's the first topic, and it's very interesting because it's only really this month that all limits have been lifted for women in the military. Moving on to the post office. Why are they in such bad financial shape, and should they stop delivery on Saturdays? Drone memos. President Obama is sending drones all over the planet to kill people that he says are terrorists, some of which include American citizens. What should be the United States policy on drones, and how much should you and I know about it? Couple other things. We got a pope who's resigned due to advanced age. Is that a good idea? And lastly, the United States is suing Standard & Poor's, the rating agency that some would argue played a major role in causing the financial crisis. So lots on the agenda, all of which I plan to discuss with my guest, Mike Lane, Republican strategist. He's a frequent guest on the show, and it's always a pleasure to have you here, Mike.
Mark, thank you for having me back. It's been a little bit of a while for us.
It has been. It has been. So lots of new issues for us to dive into. Let's start with women in the military. It was only just last week or the week before that finally all limits were lifted on women in the military, particularly in combat roles. It used to be that whether for sexist reasons or some felt for capability reasons, women could only serve in certain positions. Now, as far as I'm concerned,
I think it actually goes further than that. I think there was a desire to have a society where men went out and fought combat and women and children were not put at direct risk.
That is true. That was definitely one of the reasons given. I would argue that's a sexist reason and has no place in modern society.
An ageist reason, too. Why do we keep children out of combat?
Well, I think children, it's a different story. We've always had limits on ages. We have age of majority, we have age of majority to vote, we have age of majority to drive, for all kinds of things.
All right, so next time we're on a ship, an ocean liner, and it's going down, women and children first is no longer applying?
I'm okay with saving children first.
Okay.
Chivalry is nice and all. It's very nice, and individuals can practice it toward anyone. It seems to me that people who are in need of help, the disabled, should be first. For example, a disabled man over an able-bodied woman? Absolutely. Look, the heart of these ideas, I think, is they look at averages. And they say, on average, are men stronger than women? Sure, that's true. But that doesn't necessarily apply, importantly, in the military. Let me explain. First of all, we already have women serving in combat roles. Women are very good fighter pilots. Women can handle a machine gun. Women can be sea captains. Women can, with drone warfare, they can sit and manage the joysticks just as well as a man can. And as far as sharpshooting, there's absolutely no evidence that a man has a better eye vision in shooting a gun as a sniper than a woman does. So there's lots of capabilities in the military that have nothing to do with sheer size and physical strength. Let me get you to concede that point before I get to the physical strength point.
I concede that point.
Okay, let's talk about physical strength. Yes, it is true that the average man is larger and stronger than the average woman. But let's face it, there's lots of guys larger than me, and there are some women that are larger and stronger than me. And I think the answer is, as long as we set a single standard, and I don't know what that standard is. It should be based on what we need in the field. I don't believe in two standards. But if the standard is carrying a 60-pound pack up a hill for a mile, if that's the standard that they think is necessary for the military, or to bench press so many pounds, or even in certain categories, I'd have to think about whether this is really necessary, but maybe even categories of height. You got a woman who's 6'2" and can carry a 60-pound pack up a hill. Why shouldn't she have the same opportunities as a man with the same capabilities?
Mark, first of all, let me say it's not just strength. It's strength and stamina. And I think that the studies have shown over time that, not stamina in a marathon race, 26 miles or something like that.
In marathon races.
That's not what I'm referring to. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying over a period of 6, 8, 10, 12 months in the field, where you're at top exertion all the time. I think the studies have shown that women do not have the stamina that men have, and so their bodies start to break down, and they experience severe medical problems as a result of the same exposure that men do. Now, that's not to say that men don't experience the same problems, but it's not as fast and not as severe as what women do experience.
Okay, but Mike, you're comparing the average man to the average woman. Certainly you would concede that there are some women that have more stamina than the average man. There are certain women that are stronger than the average man. There are certain men who are weaker than a lot of women in the military. Why can't we have a single standard, whatever that standard is, based on necessities in the field, and any human being that can meet that standard that's over 18, I'll grant you the age limit, can serve in the military?
Can we have a single standard? And let me give you some examples, okay? You know I served in the Marine Corps.
I do.
When the Marine Corps was an all-male fighting force, there was one standard. When the Marine Corps began to admit women, there was two standards. And today there are two standards. It's the same with the Army. It's the same with the Navy. When you have the FBI, and the FBI went from an all-male law enforcement force to starting to admit women, guess what? There are two standards. And it's not just strength. Women have different standards in terms of marksmanship and things like that they're held to compared to their male colleagues.
How about this? How about if I concede to you there shouldn't be two standards? Marksmanship, exact same standard. Physical strength, if necessary to the job, and I don't think you necessarily need physical strength to be a combat pilot. In fact, maybe smaller bodies can fit into smaller planes even better. But assuming the standard is a necessity for the job, like infantry person, carrying a pack up the hill, whatever it is, I'm okay with a single standard. I don't want two standards for men and women, but I want those very strong, talented women who can meet the physical standards that the men meet to have the same capacity to serve. I think you're okay with that. You just don't like the two standards. Am I right?
I abhor the two standards. If we can adhere to a single standard and enforce it and not lower the standard that we have today because we discover that, I guess, it wasn't important to be that way in the first place. If we can adhere to the standards that we have today, then I think I'm okay with it, with one exception. The Marine Corps is talking about not putting women in field combat situations. I would fully support them in that decision.
Because you're afraid they'll be raped.
The Marine Corps is a different... No, exactly. You know what? No, let me get to that. Okay. The Marine Corps is a different culture and a different animal than the rest of them, and it just does not fit into their culture, and I don't think you want to change the culture of the Marine Corps. It's our best fighting force. It's the best fighting force this world has ever seen, and you really don't want to change it. Now, let's get to that rape thing that you just mentioned.
Well, let's talk about culture, but we'll get to the rape in a second, because to me, that's the worst argument, is one of culture. I mean, if you want to make an argument about effective fighting force and base it on statistics and tell me that these things really are necessary, and don't have an arbitrary standard. Don't say you have to be 6 feet tall unless being 6 feet tall is necessary for the job, because obviously there are a lot more men over 6 feet than women. But if height is necessary for the job, then fine, it's physical strength. But culture, I have a real problem with. The culture of the military prior to 1948 did not include black people. The culture of the military prior to a couple years ago didn't include gay people. Culture may not include women, but at the same time, it seems to me that anyone who's capable of doing the job should be able to do the job. I'm sure there were a lot of racists in the Marine Corps in 1948 that would say their culture did not allow for black people to serve. A lot of great black Marines.
I wasn't talking about a culture of misogyny or not liking women. Remember, the Marine Corps has, I believe, 10% of their force is women. They've served admirably, and it works out very well. But let me get to this rape thing that you brought up, because General Dempsey mentioned that in his speech supporting this whole thing, that one of the reasons that he thought that this was a great idea was because there would be fewer sexual assaults if we put women into field combat positions and let them go out there with the men. Mark, I swear I thought marijuana was illegal in the Army. I don't know what he was smoking.
I don't think it's right because there's fewer or more sexual assaults. Let's face it, any person captured POW can be subject to all kinds of brutal torture, male or female. It seems to me that everyone in the military knows of that possibility and is willing for their country to take that risk. And I certainly don't think that women are any less courageous or brave than men in that regard. So I don't accept that as a justification. To me, it's all about, frankly, hiring the best person for the job. And I think of a tank gunner, right? If you're a tank gunner and you sit in that tank and you've got good aim, and why can't the best ones be women? Now, that's combat, but let's just judge the best person for the job. Let's end these ancient notions of sexism. Look, if women want to stay home with the kids, that's their choice. This is a free country. If men want to stay home with the kids, that's their choice. It's a free country. If women want to fight and serve and protect their country in the military, then I value their service. Frankly, they already are. Afghanistan, Iraq, women are all over the place doing brave, courageous acts serving the military.
Mark, let me put a hypothetical up for you and see if you agree with the hypothetical. I'm not saying I do.
I'm listening.
But as long as we're giving women equal access, shouldn't they have equal responsibility? And doesn't that mean that they should be required to register for the selective service now?
Yes.
And doesn't it mean that when they go through boot camp against their will, they should be selected for combat infantry and sent out there if the needs of the Army or the needs of the Navy decide that that's where they will serve best, rather than giving them what they wanted in supply or admin or something like that?
I believe that women should be registered for the draft just as men have been. Now
and
we haven't had a draft. We haven't had a draft since Vietnam, right, and I'm not a supporter of the draft. If women are drafted like men because of some need, because of war, which I think is very much a hypothetical, I don't see it as anywhere likely anytime in the near future, absent a huge thing, then people should be judged based on their ability for the job. If a woman is large enough and strong enough to serve in the infantry, yes, she should be up there with the men. If the answer is that you don't want a relatively small person, someone with not a lot of physical strength serving in the infantry, if that person is better working as a doctor or behind the scenes, then we want that even for guys who are 5'4" and not that strong.
The term of art is the needs of the service.
Right.
And if the Army...
Sex alone should not determine
if the Army,
physical capability can.
If the Army in its wisdom, looking at its entire boot class, identifies 10 women who had their heart set on communications or on medicine or something like that, and decides that they are going to take a rifle and go out there and hump combat infantry in the field, should they be forced to do that against their will?
To the extent that men are forced to do things
men are forced to do it, absolutely, all the time.
They haven't been since Vietnam, but to the extent that men are...
I'm not saying they're drafted, but once you join the Army, you may have your eyes set on a particular military occupational specialty. The Army may decide, well, that's well and good, but guess what? Grab that rifle, Snuffy, and go out there and charge that hill. Should women be forced to do that against their will the same way men are?
The same way men are. I am not sexist. I believe in equality under the law. Women have the same responsibility to the country that men have, to serve on a jury, to vote, and if they are physically capable, to serve like men. And if men are not physically capable, they shouldn't be doing it. Some strong woman should be there instead. One thing I should let you know, I don't know if you know this, there's a guy in World War II, and I've already forgotten his name, but I know that he was 5'5" and weighed 112 pounds. It was considered the best machine gunner in the military. So size and strength aren't necessarily what decide who's the best warrior.
You've opened a can of worms, Mark. Be careful what you ask for.
I believe in equality under the law, and I believe women have those responsibilities. I want to know if you really disagree with that.
I haven't said I did.
I know you don't. I want to know after the break. Folks, if you call in, if you disagree, let me hear. Let me know what you think. 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. We'll be right back with this discussion right after this.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo. I would like to speak English better. Me gustaría hablar inglés mejor.
I want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
El Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals,
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
Son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia.
Comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
Ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
Again,
I would like to speak
the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
To talk about tonight with my guest, Republican strategist Mike Lane. Finishing up with women in the military, I've argued that as long as there's a single standard, which I support, and even if that standard includes 95% of men and only 5% of women, I'm okay with a single standard as long as the standard is necessary to the job. You can't tell me, I don't think, unless you prove it to me, that physical strength is necessary to be a fighter pilot or a machine gunner or someone in a tank. So there are times when the question should be, for example, marksmanship rather than physical strength. But if physical strength is indeed a bona fide occupational requirement of a certain job in the military, then judge people based on physical strength, and the women that pass the test, let them serve.
Mark, here's the thing. Physical strength is important, and let me use your example of the machine gunner.
Okay.
The average M16 rifle weighs about 6 pounds. And you carry with you probably 200 rounds of ammunition for any given firefighter, so probably 300 rounds. And so you can carry that by yourself. A machine gun weighs 50 pounds, and the belt ammunition weighs so much. The machine gunner himself humps his own gun, and he usually has 2 or 3 people as part of his squad that do nothing but hump the belt ammunition that goes with it.
Again,
so strength is huge in that.
When strength is a bona fide occupational requirement, I'm fine with it. I just think everyone should be held to the same standard.
Okay.
So you've heard my view on this. I haven't quite heard yours. What do you think?
I told you in the beginning. You weren't listening. I said I'll go along with it in the other 3 services, but I reserve the right for the Marine Corps to exempt itself.
And why is that? You said the culture, but I still didn't really follow. I'm not a Marine. I don't know the culture.
Let's not experiment with the Marine Corps. Let's keep it the world's best crack fighting force. Let's see how this works in the other branches, and then we'll address the Marine Corps later.
Well, the order doesn't matter much to me, but it seems to me that I don't know that neither Army and Navy and Air Force would accept your idea that the Marine is somehow special and different.
They do.
And they do. All right.
Remember, when the Army and the Navy look on heaven's scenes, they will find the streets are guarded by the United States Marines.
Sounds to me like someone who's supporting his own branch of the military, but let's move on. I want to talk about the post office because the Postmaster General announced just this week that they may, in this summer, I think it's in August is the plan, stop delivery of mail on Saturdays. Now, this is fascinating. Congress has ordered the post office to continue 6-day mail delivery, which they've done, frankly, ever since the post office began in the 1700s. It's done 6-day delivery, but the particular mandate runs out at the end of March. So the Postmaster General has said, well, mandate's running out. I'm going to do this. Obviously, Congress can stop him. Congress should stop him. The reason he's doing this is ostensibly because the post office is losing all this money. Let me tell you something. The loss of money for the post office is a sham, and it's caused by Congress. The post office lost $1.3 billion last year, and that's because it had to put $1.4 billion to fund a health care plan, a 75-year health care plan in 10 years. Anytime you have to do something that's supposed to be done over 75 years in 10 years, guess what? It costs a lot of money. No business has to do that. If the post office would simply be able to fund the health care plan, just like any other business, they wouldn't be in this mess. And furthermore, Congress prevents the post office from raising stamp prices. 44 cents to take a piece of paper and mail it to Alaska? That's crazy. Raise stamp prices to $1 and selling the post office is rolling in the dough.
And 44 cents to walk across the street and be prevented by law from putting it in your neighbor's box. You know, it's all, you know, here's what we ought to do, Mark. The Congress, I have it written down here, the Congress...
Article 1, Section 8.
Article 1, Section 8.
Yes.
The Congress shall have the power to,
yes.
And it says the Congress shall have the power to establish post offices and post roads. Right. They have the power to, not the obligation to. Let's get the country out of the post office business. We've passed that technologically.
Well, now, wait a second.
It's time, you know, let's spin the post office and privatize it. Let's spin it off, privatize it. And let things grow up and be competitive to it. We have email, we have text messages. The post office is an anachronism as a government agency. Spin it off, stop the subsidies, let it figure out how to make money.
if you ask me whether Congress has mismanaged the post office, I've just given you 6 reasons why I think Congress has mismanaged the post office. If you ask me in principle, do we need a post office? I think we do. The cost of sending a letter to Anchorage, Alaska, or perhaps one of those Aleutian Islands is definitely cost prohibitive. And I don't know that we should be charging $100 to send a letter to an Aleutian island.
So let's send an email.
Well, it's not the same thing. We still need letters these days. I like the idea that we are tied together as a nation, that all of us, for a relatively small price, and I think should go up to $1, 44 cents, but for a relatively small price, I think it's 45 now, actually, can get a piece of paper from one place to another. I think that's a good thing. There was a time, think about when the Constitution was written, or even just 100 years ago, when there were rural places in America that the only contact they really have with the outside world was the post office. That was the only way they had any information.
Right, and that was 100 years ago and 200 years ago, and we've passed that time.
Yes.
We now have satellites. We now have internet. We now have cell phones. We now have text messages.
You can't deny that the post office would be profitable if it weren't for Congress meddling in it. I mean, if you want it to be a private business, all right, how about if we have a compromise? We take away these congressional restrictions on their health care. We take away these, which are far more severe than Obamacare. The post office has very, very stringent standards. Different from the rest of the country. We take away the requirement that the cost of a letter can only increase at the rate of inflation, and we let them look. If Federal Express is charging me $25 to get something from one place to another, and let the post office charge me $1, they'll make plenty of money, and it will continue. And I got to tell you, the Postal Service is still something that I use, that I think you use, that I think most Americans still use. It's not dead yet.
I can't tell you the last time I mailed a letter because I don't know when it was. It was that long ago. Seriously.
Really? I probably mail a letter.
I pay my bills online. I regret to say I'm out of the Christmas card business, and that's shame on me.
Well, you don't have to use it. But the answer is, I agree it shouldn't be subsidized, but I think it can be a profitable business. Let me just ask you,
that's fine.
Do you agree with me that it should have no more stringent health care restrictions than any other business, and that it should be able to charge what it wants?
If you spin it off and make it private, it can charge whatever it wants. It can have its own employee policies, and the Congress should not interfere. The Congress won't tell it that it must or must not deliver on a certain day. Let the post office make those decisions.
I'm fine with that with one exception. I like the idea that a letter anywhere in the country costs the same price. I think that there's something about putting a stamp and knowing I can send it to Tennessee or Alaska or Hawaii or Maine or, next door, that seems to be something that brings us all together. If they can truly start charging, you're going to find rural people have to pay more, people who live far out have to pay more. They will close down post offices in rural places. I think it'll really hurt rural America if we shut down the post office. How many Federal Expresses are there in North Dakota? I don't know, but probably not that many.
No, the Federal Express actually depends on the post office to complete a high percentage of their shipping, where they don't, have an infrastructure out there.
It's a strong
they get,
infrastructure.
If you're talking about North Dakota, they get it to Bismarck, and then from Bismarck, they probably deliver it to the post office and say, "Would you complete the job for us?"
But the point is, the post office does a good job, and if it weren't for Congress,
and they'll still have that relationship.
In 2006, putting all these restrictions in it, it would be a profitable business, one that employs a large number of Americans who work hard and do a good job. I mean, they neither rain nor sleet nor snow, right? I mean, that's true. They really work hard.
We're basically in agreement. Let the post office do what it wants. Let it charge what it needs to. I think you'll find that not only will it work, but there'll be discount post offices the way there are discount cell phones. You'll find that there'll be organizations that buy pieces of the action from the post office for a certain area, the way Boost Mobile and the Cricket Mobile and things like that buy it from AT&T and buy it from...
And it gets ugly in the corners. I'll tell you something. As far as the post office is concerned, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just let them charge what they want. And or even if you want to restrict it to I think $1, they'll make more than enough money, and the post office will be solvent again. Let me move on to the next.
I have no problem with a $1 letter, but it's the post office's choice, not the Congress's choice.
No. Right now, Congress.
I know that. No. Congress does it.
Right, restricts their matter. Get rid of that. I completely agree.
Congress, get rid of the post office.
No,
privatize
don't get rid of it, but I agree that largely get out of its way. So actually, I guess we do have a lot of agreement here. I wouldn't fully privatize it, but I'd remove about 90% of the restrictions. So we're only 10% different there.
With subsidies come strings.
That's true. Let me move on to a third issue. This one's very interesting because I certainly complained about George W. Bush and his conduct in Iraq and torture, and you and I had many, many discussions on that front. And I particularly condemned memos from the Justice Department under Bush, from the Office of Legal Counsel, that I think authorized this stuff. I want to be fair, and I want to be fair as a Democrat. I'm concerned about Obama's drone memos. Now, I have not read them. I know that some of them have been released. I don't know that necessarily those are the proper memos or drafts of them, the ones released by the New York Times. But it seems to me... And
NBC News also.
And not just New York Times, but a number of news sources. I'm concerned by giving any American president the right to kill American citizens anywhere in the world, I guess except for the United States. I hope except for the United States. I haven't read the memos. At least let them be abroad. But the one thing I do like in what is purported to be the memos is the argument that you can only kill people that cannot be arrested alive. In other words,
but in whose judgment? That's the
point. That's why this stuff should be public, right? I mean, we shouldn't be able to kill a terrorist in England or France or Canada. If this is a country that is a functioning Western country with an extradition treaty with the United States, then we should be able to, under the force of those laws and treaties, get that person arrested, bring them to the United States. Particularly if it's an American citizen. I'm very concerned about that. Now, I understand there's an imminent threat in wartime, but my understanding of the memos is that imminent threat ain't so imminent. I have no sympathy for Al-Awlaki. From all accounts, he's an awful person. He's dead now. American citizen. Yemen is certainly a state that's lawless. I actually can justify that particular death, but I'm concerned about a policy that gives the president carte blanche.
Can you justify on that? I think we all know Al-Awlaki was as bad an apple as they come.
That's right.
And deserved to die.
I'm fine with that.
Can we justify the death of the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution?
I don't think so. Here's what I want to do, and I think you'd agree with this. If we believe that I understand an imminent threat in wartime. I respect that. Mm-hmm. The president has wartime powers. But it seems to me that it shouldn't be that hard, in a very rare case, to go before a secret court even, but an Article III court, and to say, this particular American citizen, bring up charges. I mean, some charges are warrant the death penalty. Show some kind of evidence that this person is dangerous, they are who they say they are, we don't have the wrong guy, they're a terrorist, and that they do have an imminent threat, to show that the president has authority, particularly for American citizens, to kill them. I would want at least that kind of minimum protection. How about you?
At least. I mean, I have...
At least? All right, maybe even more.
Here's the thing. I like you, am totally unsettled on the death of American citizens without due process.
Exactly.
Let's take the break. We'll continue.
Okay, we'll do that. Folks, if you want to join this discussion, please join in. This is interesting because conservatives and liberals actually sometimes agree on this. 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Add your 2 cents. Do you think we should be doing these drone strikes without some court looking over it? You know.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because
just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit ASHA.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folks, but for others.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. We're talking at the moment about the drone policy. Of course, President Obama, like his predecessors, has been sending unmanned aircraft to kill people that the president or the executive branch or the military believe are terrorists, in some cases, including American citizens. It's just been disclosed that there were memos by the Office of Legal Counsel in the Justice Department justifying these killings. The Obama administration has not released these memos to the public. Apparently, they have released them to certain members of Congress. The question is, what's legal and what's not? And we're going to get to Anthony from D.C. in just a second. Right now, I have my guest, Republican strategist Mike Lane. What's your view?
Mark, the part I wanted our viewers to know about, that gives us both pause, I think, is the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And I quote, and it says, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." There's a lot more to the Fifth Amendment, but to me, that's pretty clear. And here we are in a situation where we're depriving American citizens of their life without due process of law.
It's interesting. The Fifth Amendment also says, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger.
Right.
So it's actually it's a squirrely term.
It is, but interestingly, sometimes I think he's just the worst person in the world, and sometimes I think, like a broken clock, Dick Durbin is right maybe twice a year. The very, very first time since Obama has been elected, I heard Dick Durbin on television this Sunday use the term the war on terrorism, and he endorsed it as we are in a war on terrorism, even though Democrats have denied that since Inauguration Day of 2008. Or 2009. I'm
okay with all kinds of highfalutin terms, war on terrorism, war on drugs, but to the extent that it becomes a real war, the kind of war that the Constitution talks about, I'd like to see a declaration of war to be a real war. Anthony from D.C., welcome to the show. Thanks for calling in. What's your view on the drone policy? Anthony, do we have you on the line?
Yes, hi. How are you today?
I'm good. Welcome. Thanks for calling in. What's your view?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine. Can you hear us?
You're very welcome. I can't hear you on the phone, so unfortunately I'm going to have to listen to you through the computer with the delay. But nevertheless, I was kind of stunned by the points you guys were making with regard to drone strikes. You were so willing to allow al-Awlaki to be killed and, to just kind of eviscerate his constitutional rights at the whim, quite literally, of the president, because there really is no process involved. But you said absolutely nothing about his 16-year-old son, Abu Rahman al-Awlaki, who basically got murdered in a very similar way, and there's no information whatsoever that he was involved in terrorism, and just like his father, he was an American citizen. Secondarily, you guys have said nothing about signature strikes, which is basically the ability for the president to attack people who look like they might possibly be engaging in terrorism, because how many young men are congregated in a group, how many people may happen to be walking in a straight line across a mountain pass, and other, just generalistic type concepts whatsoever. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous slippery slope. I mean, the reality of the situation is that drones allow us the flexibility to get ourselves in situations that we don't want to be in. It allows us to commit forces to scenarios that we don't want to actually commit forces to. We don't want to send soldiers in the line of duty, so we allow a drone to do it. And quite frankly, the collateral damage be damned. And it's a very unfortunate direction by which we're taking our nation, and we really need to stop this.
I appreciate your call, Anthony. Thank you for giving your point of view. I want to respond.
First of all, let me say, Anthony, I disagree that neither Mark or I expressed our reservation in the way it happened. I think we're both here.
Said that al-Awlaki isn't a good guy, but we are very troubled by any president having this power. And the point about his son is absolutely a good point.
That is a great point. But I asked Mark directly if getting al-Awlaki was worth the trashing of the Fifth Amendment, and he said no.
Right. So we may
and I read the Fifth Amendment
on how to deal with it, but I've been critical of President Obama on this. I began by saying I was critical of President Bush on this score. It'd be inconsistent for me not to be critical of President Obama. Look, I understand that in war mistakes happen. I understand that in war, actually, sometimes innocents are killed in the necessity of war. The problem is with a war on terror. The reason why I really don't like the term, particularly if it's used legalistically rather than just rhetorically.
But apparently Dick Durbin does now.
Well, again, that may just be rhetoric. To the extent that people say war on terror and mean it as war, W-A-R, constitutional war, then it seems to me you need a congressional declaration of war, because the idea that we can be anywhere in the globe killing anybody under wartime standards, which are very lax standards. I mean, you shoot at a gun at opposing forces, you don't know their name, you don't do any research to find out that they really are dangerous and not civilian and so forth. That is part of the laws of war. But the idea that we just sort of go into Yemen and shoot anybody is a problem. I need to know that we are at least getting who we think we're getting, and that the person cannot be arrested under ordinary circumstances. Again, if they were in a nation that obeyed treaties and so forth. If it's a really bad guy, like Al-Awlaki appears to be, and they can prove it and they can show it, I would show it to an Article III court. Listen, we have a right to put people to death in the United States of America for things they've done beyond a reasonable doubt. If we can show that there's a bad guy and they're a terrorist and they're planning an attack on the United States, even if they're an American citizen, and we can't physically arrest them, then I think in these limited circumstances I could see the necessity for this. But I do want a lot of protections and a lot more than we have right now.
I disagree with taking it to a court. I don't think there are any courts that have any particular expertise in national security and being able to evaluate those things.
We could have a special court that does it. We have the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. We do have special courts for special things.
I understand that. I think the program, if better understood, it might be a good program. It makes me nervous as hell. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I think the CIA is the wrong. When did the CIA get in the assassination business?
They're supposed to be about information.
This is not the CIA program. This program should be moved to the Department of Defense.
When did they start that?
And that will put it...
Since they've been around, since the 1940s, they started that.
And that will put it under the auspices of congressional oversight of the Armed Services Committees, where they can look at what's going on and work with the administration and be informed as to what's going on, as opposed to the CIA, which really should not be in this business.
Well, Mike, let me ask you. So let's take the example of Al-Awlaki, and we don't know of too many American citizens that have been assassinated by I don't know, say the president or the military or whomever.
Probably more than we know of, but
I'm sure there's a lot more than we know.
But not a ton.
There's probably less than 100, at least I hope. But we do know this one name, Al-Awlaki. So tell me, if it's not through the court system, how you would make sure that it's not some other guy named Anwar Al-Awlaki who's killed in Yemen and is the wrong guy, and he's an innocent peddler who born in the United States and lived in Yemen.
The main Justice Department memo that I read on this was the one that was first released by NBC News. And it has so many vague things in it.
Lots of weasel words.
First of all, the decision can be made by a top government official. Well, what is a top? Is an assistant?
That's defined.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Is a deputy assistant secretary in the Commerce Department? Is that a top government official?
I sure hope not.
Is the president's White House political advisor? Is that a top government official? It's just.
Here's the thing, Mike. Though I'm glad you're joining me in my suspicion and my nervousness about this memo. But I got to say, 4 years ago, or 5 or 6 years ago, we had this discussion about the torture memos done by John Woo that allowed George Bush's people to do waterboarding and so forth. And I expressed my concern that these things could go too far. You were very defending of those things. Aren't you a little bit inconsistent here?
Isn't the president a little bit inconsistent here?
Well, sure, he is too. But let me deal with you first, and I'll get to Obama in a second. I mean, my point is I am critical of Obama and these memos in the same way I was critical of Bush. I think you gave Bush more leeway than you gave Obama.
I think you're very consistent, which is the hobgoblin of small minds, Mark. You have to be able to be.
No, but why you obviously there should be a single standard no matter who's president of the United States.
The standard can vary a little bit depending on the circumstances. I don't think it should depend on the president. I think that...
Let me give you this distinguishing example. Let me give you a distinguishing example. Right. I think if there's a country that we've declared war against, and we can argue over whether the declaration to send troops into Afghanistan was a declaration of war or not. A lot of legal scholars would argue it wasn't, but some would argue that it was. But it's different when we go and there's a guy and he's in Afghanistan and he's got a gun pointed at our soldiers. I'm okay with hitting that guy, even if he's an American citizen.
Absolutely.
I'm okay with that.
Absolutely.
He's shooting a gun at American soldiers. They catch him in his sights.
That's an act of war.
He's taking people down.
Right.
That's an act of war. We can do that. When we get to countries that we don't have troops in, like Yemen, then I start getting nervous, particularly with regard to American citizens. And I want some findings somewhere. If you want to make it in the military rather than the courts, I want a written record that says, Anwar al-Awlaki, here's proof you're a bad guy, and we're going after you.
Mark, some more inconsistencies. You already brought up the idea that one of the criteria is that they can't be arrested, that there's no chance of arresting them.
That's an important criteria, don't you think?
I absolutely think that. But who is making the determination that we can't put a SEAL team in there and grab this guy and bring him out? Who makes that determination?
First of all, there should be a list of countries on Earth where we will never conduct an assassination. We should never conduct an assassination in England or France or Canada or any democratic nation that has an extradition treaty with the United States. And that's probably half the world right there. All right. When we get to countries, I think you can even have, if it's Somalia or if it's Yemen or if it's basically failed anarchic states, there should be more leeway. If it's Canada, there should be no leeway. We shouldn't be assassinating anybody in Canada.
By the way, my apologies to the Army, who have wonderful special forces as well. I didn't mean to single out the SEALs. They just seem to have the best PR machine going on these days. Another problem with this memo is that it's so vague.
It is
every
vague.
way,
But I got to tell you, the Bush memos were even more vague. One of the things I liked about the Obama memo is at least it said imminent danger, although it was vague about what's imminent. And it also said that they have to be in a country where we cannot get them by legal process. Bush didn't have those restrictions.
John Brennan, the current national security advisor, the nominated CIA director, went in front of Congress last week and said, we're not using this as retribution. We're not going in there to get guys who did something unless they're, going to plan something else. But then the memo itself says that, the memo says, well, we don't have to really be aware of the fact that they're currently planning. As long as they did something in the past and never renounced it, then we assume they're planning something else.
The memo is vague in order to give the president a lot of leeway, but it's actually more specific than the Bush memos. And if you condemn the Bush memos, Mike, I might believe you a little bit more when you're condemning the Obama memos. That's all I got to say.
You can believe me. I'm very uncomfortable with
I'm uncomfortable too.
What Eric Holder and Barack
also.
Obama have created.
Barack Obama has just, I believe, yesterday. No, it was last week, a couple days ago, shared those memos with the intelligent branches of Congress. That's absolutely required, as far as I'm concerned, under the law. Every president needs to share its. If any memos like this allow the president to assassinate someone, absolutely have to be shared with the intelligence branches of Congress. And I would like to see a law by Congress either authorizing or unauthorizing it. But the Congress shouldn't be able to get out of the way here. It's their job to set policy just as much as the president on this issue.
I don't know that we can get around the Fifth Amendment. I am still hung up on that. If we can start shredding the Bill of Rights.
Well, the Fifth Amendment has an exception for war. It's really the question of what the definition of war is.
Right.
So I don't. It's wrong. Whether or not it's wrong in the Fifth Amendment or not, I'll leave to other minds to decide. We've got a lot of topics left. In just 15 minutes, we're going to talk about the lawsuit against Standard & Poor's, the resignation of the Pope, and the State of the Union, all coming up right after this.
She's had more than a dozen fractures. In years, she faces 2 major surgeries to strengthen her fragile bones. She's only 10 years old. Most people don't worry about fragile bones until late in life. For those with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bones are a concern throughout their lifetime. Find out how you can strengthen this child's future.
Diabetes is a killer. After I was diagnosed, I didn't feel sick, so I didn't listen to my doctor. Then it struck. I had a heart attack, then a stroke, and I was only 49.
Most people with diabetes also have high blood pressure and cholesterol, which can cause severe heart damage. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke.
Don't let diabetes destroy your life.
Call for your free diabetes survival guide. Choose to live.
again, the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
The Inside Scoop, I'm your host, Mark Levine. Just 15 minutes left, still a lot to talk about. Mike Lane is my guest. He's a Republican strategist. Mike, the United States government, the Justice Department, has sued Standard & Poor's just this week, and they're doing it because Standard & Poor's, a rating agency, frankly, Moody's and Fitch are, I think, 96 or 99% of all ratings agencies. They told us that when you sliced and diced 1,000 or 100,000 or 1 million people's houses, that even if 1 million people couldn't pay their debts, if you sliced and diced it in 1 million pieces, then suddenly these were AAA bond ratings. These were as good as the United States government. Anyone with half a brain should have known that wasn't true. And Standard & Poor's made huge fees off of telling people these things are good. We need, first of all, to regulate these agencies, and Dodd-Frank does part of that. We could do more. But secondly, Standard & Poor's made a lot of money off this fraud, and in the process really are largely to blame, along with the people who are actually causing these things. They're largely to blame for the fact that we're in the financial crisis we're in. What's wrong with suing them and telling them, you know what, you have to pay for it?
Absolutely nothing. Here's the...
You agree? Right.
Look, the allegations are that...
They have to be proven in a court.
The allegations are that S&P violated their own standards and misrepresented the value of these securities in the market.
Right. Default swaps.
To create a... they committed fraud, basically.
Right. It's fraud.
Now, to the extent that is illegal, assuming we have the proper illegal statutes against that, they ought to be prosecuted and they ought to be held accountable.
I'm glad you say that. I'm actually a little surprised. I've seen conservative commentators argue in op-eds that Standard & Poor's is one of just 3 ratings agencies and taking them down doesn't solve anything, and then there'll just be 2. And to me, that's the same too big to fail argument that I didn't like when they made it about the banks. Let someone else take over Standard & Poor's outfit. Let the people who committed fraud be prosecuted. And if it puts Standard & Poor's out of business, I'm okay with it.
Somebody else will step in.
Exactly.
There's no vacuum.
I'm surprised you agree, but I'm glad to hear it. Let me move on to the resignation of the Pope, which I found very interesting. Of course, I'm not a Catholic and you are, so you may have some very personal views on it. But I myself liked it. Of course, it hasn't happened since the 1400s, I believe, some 600 years.
Right, and even then it was not for health reasons. It was for political reasons.
Well, now that's even more interesting. Tell me about that.
There was a schism in the church, and there were 2 people who were putting themselves out there as Pope, and there was a reconciliation, and one of them had to resign. So for political reasons, Pope Gregory, I think it was, back in the 1400s.
You're talking about the 1400s. I thought you were talking about
today.
No. What schism? What did I miss?
No.
What did I miss? But let me tell you why I think it's a good idea. Now, maybe I'm thinking more of kings than I like that Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands also abdicated this week to let her son, who's in his 40s, become king, and she's in, I think, her 70s or 80s.
I don't think we'll see that from Elizabeth.
No, we won't see it from Elizabeth, but she should. Poor Prince Charles has been waiting for 64 years.
And he can continue to wait.
I think there's something to be said for somebody, I don't care whether you're a king, queen, or pope, recognizing at a certain advanced age that they can't do the job anymore and getting out of the way. Now, if they felt if the Pope felt he could do the job, or the Queen felt she could do the job, then obviously they have the right to do that. But whether it's a Supreme Court justice who has the right to serve for life, a king, queen, or pope, I think if someone... Pope John Paul II, let me just mention him, because I have tremendous respect for the man. Certainly, in my lifetime, the best pope. We can argue about John XXIII, that's before I was born. But certainly a signature world leader, definitely someone who made a great stride in history. But his last years, when he was physically falling apart, I don't think he could be the kind of vigorous person that he could be in his earlier years. What's wrong with the Pope resigning?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing's wrong with it. It was a surprise because it hasn't happened in 600 years.
Right.
I think that, we will find out probably over the course of the next weeks or months or years.
I assume with some kind of physical infirmity.
Or perhaps even mental infirmity. The Pope made a reference to you need to be of strong mind and body, and said that he was no longer up to the vigorous leadership that the church required. Remember, the Pope is not a figurehead, a titular figurehead. The Pope is actually a hands-on manager of the church, right, and spiritual leader of the Catholic nation, and et cetera. So he felt that for some reason he was not up to doing the job and tendered his resignation effective the end of this month. The College of Cardinals will get together in March and we'll select a new pope, and we'll see where it goes.
Do you agree with me that whether Pope, Supreme Court Justice, King, or Queen, that even though there are positions that you get for life, that when a man or woman in that position feels that they are physically or mentally unable to do the job, that it's the right thing to step down, even if they're a figurehead. I'm sorry, if Elizabeth II loses her mind, and she's very much hands-on, but if she gets Alzheimer's, if she starts to not be fully there, I like this precedent that these people, again, Supreme Court Justice, King, Queen, or Pope, that they step down. That's the right thing to do. You agree?
I think it's certainly an attractive option. I wouldn't want to make it a requirement.
No, we can't make it a requirement because it's hard to judge.
But it's an attractive option. I would recommend it to Justice Ginsburg at this point. It would be a good thing for her to do.
She's doing fine. Justice Scalia seems to be pretty loopy. Doesn't know how to read the Constitution. Maybe he should step down. Let me move on to the last thing, the State of the Union. President Obama is going to deliver the State of the Union address tomorrow night. It probably will be about an hour long. If it's like most State of the Union addresses, it'll be very much detailed on policy, what he wants to do with regard to immigration and gun control and the environment and the economy and the deficit and the whole laundry list of things. And it'll be, I'm sure, treated the way most of these State of the Unions are. Democrats will cheer him, Republicans will jeer him, and then everyone afterwards will talk about it. To me, that's actually less interesting than the person the Republicans chose to respond. I actually think this is the biggest rising star in your party, Marco Rubio. You've heard me talk about him before. Mm-hmm. I told you I thought he should run in 2012.
I said he wasn't ready.
And you said he wasn't ready. He's young, he's Latino, he's actually seems to me a lot more moderate. I know people consider him Tea Party, but I don't. I don't see him taking a lot of the far-out Tea Party positions that a lot of the more unattractive candidates in your party have taken. Is Marco Rubio, is the party now going to Marco Rubio? Is he the clear front runner?
Well, first of all, he was one of only 9 senators, I think one of only 5 Republican senators to vote against the tax deal. So, he put down his marker. I think he is running for president in 2016. There's no doubt in my mind. I think that one of the mistakes he has to look out for is he doesn't want to peak too soon. You don't want to become overexposed and do that. He is a very attractive, articulate young guy, a new generation of leaders for the Republican Party. His current issue that he's taken leadership on is immigration. Where he's getting a little bit off the reservation. It might be his sister soldier moment for him to convince people that he's not beholden to all the interests within his party, that he's willing to do that.
He's made an agreement with Chuck Schumer. Now, I don't know many Republicans that would like any Republican who makes an agreement with Chuck Schumer, but Schumer and Rubio have come to an immigration deal. Now, the details aren't written down yet.
Details are not written down yet.
It's a statement of principle. I'm sure the devil's in the details. But how do Republicans feel about the fact that Rubio, unlike, let's face it, most people in your party, is willing to work across the aisle to come to a deal?
Well, interesting that he should work with Schumer, who is, most Republicans think is about as untrustworthy. I mean, the guy, his word is not worth much to Republicans.
No, I think the Republicans just recognize he's a very strong partisan Democrat.
But his word is not worth it. I mean, he's one of those ones that he's like Lucy. He moves the football all the time. That's his style. He's effective at it, but he moves the football all the time.
Is the hatred of Schumer so strong that people are going to distrust Rubio for working?
No, if this deal goes south, it's because of the president, not because of Chuck Schumer. Look, you have a deal in the Senate. You have the workings of a deal coming on in the House. You have Eric Cantor giving speeches as to where the deal should be in the House. There is the chance for things to come together if Congress is left alone to do it. As long as the president goes out and makes partisan speeches castigating the Republican Party for partisan political reasons, he's going to drive a wedge through the deal and it's going to fall apart. If the president really wanted the deal, he should call up each of the Republicans involved in these secret negotiations and say, how can I help? What do you need? And to a man or woman, every one of them would say, Mr. President, just keep your mouth shut.
I'll tell you something. I think that would be the wrong approach, and I'll tell you why. When it came to health care, when it came to cap and trade, the president met with Republicans. He met with them in secret. He put in 24 Republican amendments in Obamacare, and he didn't go out and stump for it. And then what the Republicans do, they got everything they wanted in Obamacare, and then they turned against it. They got everything they wanted in cap and trade, and they turned against it. It's the presidential speeches is the reason why we got the tax and budget deal, because when he works quietly with Republicans, you say Schumer isn't trustworthy. Republicans tell him one thing, and they do another thing on the floor. by going out and lobbying for the case, he keeps American public opinion there where it should be, helping to make sure that these people are part of American society.
You have 230 Republicans in the House, all of whom in a pretty strong Democrat year were all very strongly reelected in their own districts.
The majority of Americans voted for the Democrats.
They don't. No, I'm talking about 230.
If you draw the lines like this, the Republicans won.
Right. So let's talk about the politics. The politics are you have 230 Republicans who are very popular in their districts and do not have to fear Obama going out there and generating letters or generating phone calls or generating anything because Obama is not popular in their districts.
They have to fear it because even the gerrymandered Republican in his safe district understands that the Latino Americans are 12 to 13% of the population. They are the largest minority population in the United States.
You're talking the issue. You're not talking the president. They don't have any fear of the president going out there and ginning up letters in reaction on anything. The president is irrelevant to those districts. He can't impact them. He was on the ballot this time, Mark, and 230 of them got elected in their districts. That's as strong an impact as he's ever going to have. The president is irrelevant in those districts.
Look, this is an issue that's going to grow. And in those, it's not, Latinos the population is growing, and there's only so much you can gerrymander before the voice of the people gets heard. And the Republicans are going to be on the wrong side of history if they don't reach out to these new Americans and welcome them as citizens.
Well, I disagree with your flat out thing there. The deal in the Senate, which the president is going to abrogate, is that first you get border security, and when you certify that we have border security, then we'll start the path to citizenship. So what happens? Secretary of Homeland Defense Napolitano gets out there the end of last week and says, I certify we have border security.
There you go, because largely we do.
It's a non-starter, Mark.
If
you certify that right now we have border security, so that should be done and everything else now happens, you've killed the deal.
Border security is subjective, Mike.
You will kill the deal.
I don't care whether we have a double fence with piranha moat in the middle and barbed wire fence. A few people will get through if that's not secure.
No, I think we have to say, less than X amount. And
now, Obama's done more deportations.
Right now, by tens of thousands.
Obama's done more deportations than Bush. Fewer people have crossed the border than Bush. The border is more secure now than it ever was.
It is not secure. It is not secure.
It will never be 100% secure.
It needs to be 98% secure. It's about 75% secure now.
He's working on it.
Napolitano is lying, and she clears the deal. And she keeps that up.
Always a pleasure.
I
disagree with you, but it's always a pleasure. If you want to find out more about the Inside Scoop, go to my website, marklevintalk.com, where you'll see this show and all the many shows we've done. Thank you for listening.